Window 20 on St. Mark's 2020 online Advent calendar. Each window contains a surprise Bible verse, history of a love carol, meditation, and a brief prayer. The goal is to give St. Mark's members a greater appreciation for the assorted and loved songs we sing at Christmas time, and to let us know how and where each developed and why. It is our hope that you receive a special blessing from these devotions this year as we approach and anticipate Christmas. Today's carol is We Three Kings.
Today's scripture comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is where the prophet has written, 'You will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel.'" Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I may go too and worship him." After they heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route.
Even a century ago, many people erroneously assumed that We Three Kings was an ancient work. Members of the Episcopal Church, who should have known better, often labeled the song as being primeval origin, the name of its creator lost to history. In reality, the song is much newer than many in the hymnal. It is the work of John Henry Hopkins Jr. Huge swaths of English-speaking world know his song, while the people of his church and of his home state have largely forgotten his name. When a John Henry Hopkins is remembered in Vermont, it is invariably his father the people recall. And that's understandable. Hopkins Sr. had an outsized personality, numerous gifts ranging from music to writing to architecture, and a prestigious job, Episcopalian Bishop of Vermont. But Hopkins Sr., a native of Ireland, also held some beliefs that have not aged well. The elder Hopkins was vehemently anti-Catholic. He wrote a screed in 1834 about Catholicism entitled Primitive Creed. He was also pro-slavery, citing scripture to argue that blacks were inferior to whites.
Growing up in his shadow and with his name could not have been easy for the younger Hopkins, but he seemed to have loved his father and emulated him in many ways, though he didn't share all his beliefs. The younger Hopkins also couldn't repress his own more lighthearted nature. The family moved to Burlington from Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1831, when Hopkins Sr. was named rector at St. Paul's Church, and the next year Bishop of Vermont. In Vermont, the younger Hopkins found a home. Only 11 years old when he arrived in the state, he would adopt Vermont as his home, despite living most of his adult life elsewhere. When Bishop Hopkins founded the Vermont Episcopal Institute, he needed an assistant to help run it. So he picked his teenage son to become tutor and the occasional administrator of the floggings that were part of 19th century school discipline. Hopkins also played flute and bugle in the school orchestra, taught Sunday school, and sang in the church choir. By the age of 15, Hopkins was enrolled at the University of Vermont, not an uncommon age to start higher education at that time. He was a strong student, particularly when it came to languages and literature. Like his father, he also became an accomplished musician and artist.
Upon graduating in 1839, Hopkins returned to help his father at the school while also studying law with a small Burlington firm. When a financial crisis hit the United States that year, the Hopkins family's finances suffered. Soon they had to close the school and find a home they could afford. They had to settle for a house so run down that they were the last people to live there. John Hopkins felt an obligation to his parents and his siblings. He had 11 who lived to adulthood, so he moved to New York City to earn money for the family. There he became a journalist and continued his law studies, but he felt drawn back to Burlington and wanted to find a way to make a living there. The plans included the family finding a better place to live. Hopkins found it one day while walking with his brothers near Lake Champlain in the Rock Point area of Burlington. The view of the lake and the Adirondacks was inspiring. This is where they would build. Soon afterward, Hopkins developed a throat ailment. Doctors suggested that he live for a time in a warmer climate, so he ventured south to Georgia. There, living in the home of another Episcopalian bishop, he found an eager audience for his humorous caricatures he liked to draw. He made the mistake of telling his father how funny people found his drawings. The Bishop Hopkins was not amused and sent a scathing letter to his son.
Hopkins wrote back to his father that it was with great shame and sorrow that I read your last and severe letter and discovered how far I had unthinkingly been led astray. He explained that he had shown Bishop Hopkins' letter to his host. The Georgia bishop agreed with the criticism. Bishop Hopkins' letter had a strong effect on his 23-year-old son. He soon returned home and, 2 years later, completed his master's degree at UVM. He ventured back to New York City to study at the General Seminary, from which he graduated in 1850 and became a deacon and later a priest in the Episcopal Church. His work with the church, he led congregations in Plattsburgh, New York, and later in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, which allowed him to explore his interest in music. He began writing hymns to replace the drab pieces he tired of hearing during services. Hopkins looked to German chorales and ancient church music for inspiration. Perhaps that is why We Three Kings of Orient Are sounds so timeless. The song, which Hopkins composed in 1857 and originally entitled The Gift of the Magi, begins, We three kings of Orient are, bearing gifts we traverse afar, field and fountain, moor and mountain, following yonder star.
Glorious night.